This is BBC News, broadcasting to viewers here in the UK and around the world. I'm James Reynolds, the headlines. The first resignation from the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's new cabinet. Gavin Williamson says allegations that Williamson was a bully were becoming a distraction. Millions of Americans have been voting in midterm elections to decide which party will control Congress in the next 2 years. The Democrats fear they will lose their majority in the House of Representatives, but there's much tighter competition for the Senate. With less than 2 weeks to kick off, the former head of FIFA says it was a mistake to award Qatar the World Cup. The United Nations has called for the immediate release of the British-Egyptian pro-democracy activist Alaa Abd El Fattah from prison near Cairo. Hello and welcome. A cabinet minister appointed by the new UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak just 2 weeks ago when the government began has resigned after being accused of bullying. Gavin Williamson has apologised for sending angry text messages to a minister about not being invited to the Queen's funeral in September. Gavin Williamson denied other allegations that he had bullied civil servants, but said that those allegations were becoming a distraction. Our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus, has the latest. Sarah Smith reporting. I want to take you to Cleveland in the state of Ohio, where voters are casting their ballots. It's just past 6 in the evening. They've got another hour and 20 minutes or so to make up their minds. Many people in this election across the country will have voted early, including President Biden himself. And in Ohio, there's a fascinating contest for Senate between J.D. Vance, the Republican candidate, and Tim Ryan from the Democratic Party. You can follow all the results and analysis of the midterm elections very, very shortly with Katty and Christian Fraser on BBC News from 23:15 GMT and also on the BBC News website. Coverage starts in about 10 minutes. Well, with about 12 days to go to the start of the Football World Cup in Qatar, there are renewed doubts about the suitability of the Arab state to host the tournament. Sepp Blatter, who's the former president of FIFA, said that he'd always been of the view that the country was too small to host the event. There's also been worldwide criticism of remarks by Khalid Salman, a former Qatari professional footballer, now a World Cup ambassador, who said that homosexuality was, in his words, damage in the mind. He warned that gay people that they would have to accept the country's rules when they visited. Our sports correspondent Jane Dougal reports. Let's get some of the day's other news now. The world record in lottery jackpots won on a single ticket has been broken by one lucky Powerball player in California who won $2 billion. The winner bought their ticket at a service station in Los Angeles. Officials in Washington have stressed that only Ukraine can decide for itself whether or not to start talks with Russia, and that Moscow will have to face justice for its actions amid reports that the United States has been encouraging Ukraine to show that it is open to dialogue. India says it will continue buying Russian oil because it's so cheap. On a visit to Moscow, India's foreign minister said since the arrangement had worked to India's advantage, they would keep the trade going. Russia's share in India's oil imports last month surged to an all-time high of 22% from just about 2% before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that's just about it from me. Let's now join my colleagues Katty and Christian Fraser for special coverage of the US midterm results.
It's election night across America. 50 states, millions of votes, and an outcome that will be felt here and around the world.
The control of Congress is up for grabs, with Republicans looking to retake the House and the Senate from the Democrats.
Across the states, voters have lined up to choose governors and a host of local officials, people who could decide how future American elections are fought.
I'm John Sudworth in Pennsylvania, watching a key US Senate race here in this state that could have a significant bearing on whether Joe Biden becomes a lame duck president, and where you can tell just how tight this contest is because the legal wrangling has already begun over which votes to count.
I'm Neda Tawfiq in Miami, Florida, Donald Trump's home state. But will the Republican Governor Ron DeSantis use this election as a springboard to make his own bid for the White House in 2024? And if there is a Republican landslide, will Florida end its status as a swing state tonight?
And I'm Gary O'Donoghue in Atlanta, Georgia, where there's another key Senate race and the candidates are neck and neck. We may not get a result tonight, but it could make a difference to Joe Biden's ability to get things done. The polls close in 40 minutes. We'll bring you the results as they come in.
I'm Mariana Spring. I'm the BBC's disinformation and social media correspondent. I'm here in the newsroom in DC, and I'm tracking how falsehoods, conspiracy theories and hate spread online during election night.
And we'll have the best analysis all night from our panel of American experts from both sides of the political spectrum. Welcome to Washington.
And welcome to American Elections 2022 from the BBC.
Hello, I'm Katty Kay.
And I'm Christian Fraser, and for the next 8 hours we will be bringing you the results and the analysis of the US midterm elections. This is a uniquely American phenomenon. Hundreds of individual races, each one a piece of a nationwide puzzle. And by the end, we hope to have a clear picture of the American political landscape for the coming few years.
We hope. For Republicans, it's a chance to retake the House of Representatives and perhaps even the Senate. If they're successful, that would set them on good footing heading into the presidential race of 2024. The Democrats, of course, they want to prevent all of that. They want to head into the next election with momentum of their own.
Then there are questions over election security and violence. The shadow of the January 6 riots at the Capitol hangs over this vote. Many Republican candidates still falsely claiming Donald Trump won the 2020 presidential election. And then there are very real questions about whether America can even host a peaceful democratic process.
Wisconsin, the new Florida, the new state to watch in American politics. You heard it here first. It is midnight in the UK and 7 o'clock in the evening here in Washington, D.C. Polls are now closing in the midterm elections. They've shut in the states of Indiana, Kentucky, South Carolina, Vermont, Virginia, and in the key state of Georgia. We were hearing from Gary O'Donoghue earlier. Votes are now being counted, and we'll be live in Atlanta as we wait for clues on which way the state's important races are going to go.
Yeah, and we're going to look very closely at Virginia, because what we're looking for tonight, Katty, is some evidence of this red wave that Republicans are hoping for. And there are three key House states, which I'll show you shortly on the screen, which might just give us an indication of where this is going tonight.
Yeah, and I think that's the important thing for us to try and give you as you're watching this and trying to figure out, is it the Republicans who are going to have a good night, and is it the Democrats? We promise you, we will not bury you under a whole slew of results, but we will bring out the key ones and try to make sense of those for you. Congresswoman Beatty, thank you very much for joining us there from Ohio. Thank you for joining the program, taking the time on a very busy night. We have polls that are going to be closing in just a few minutes' time in a bunch of critical states in Florida, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and 13 other states. I feel rather bad for those 13 other states, but we will talk about some of those too. We'll talk about Maryland because there's an interesting governor's race there.
I'm rooting on Florida.
We'll come back at the top of the hour.
I want to use my screen, and Florida, they count really quickly.
So
I'm hoping I can get into something in Florida.
Christian likes Florida. Breaking news for the evening. We'll be back in just a moment. It's 8 p.m. in Washington, 1 a.m. GMT, and you're watching American Elections 2022 from the BBC. We're starting to get a steer on how this evening is going. Our partners at CBS News say the Senate race in Georgia is a toss-up. not a huge surprise. That is what the polls have been indicating. Looks like it's going to be a close one, though. The Ohio Senate race, however, leaning Republican to the candidate J.D. Vance.
Meanwhile, the House overall leans Republican at this hour, but again, it is still early days. The polls have only just closed in two of the most significant states in these midterm elections, Pennsylvania and Florida. We'll be live in Miami shortly and Philadelphia later in the hour. Lots of interesting races, particularly in Florida, a governor's position, a Senate position, and also lots of interesting House races, which I'll get into on the screen. But we're joined in the studio by the other part of our stellar panel, pair of political minds that many of you will be familiar with. Brian Lanza, who worked on Donald Trump's 2016 transition team, and Marianne Marsh, who is a Democratic strategist and has been out there over the course of the last few days, doing a lot of campaigning. How are you feeling about it?
I'm feeling rather sorry for Gabriella. I kind of wish she could just stay with her music.
I'm watching the face of Brian,
music and her
communications expert, filling with ideas about what he's going to do at the next election.
Mariana, do come back in again because we want to keep on hearing how they're doing. Please say to Gabriella, I know you don't communicate with her. She is part of you. Get back to the shopping. She'll have a much better night's sleep. Before we go quickly, Maxwell Frost, first Gen Z member of Congress in Florida, has been elected. He is only 25 years old.
Makes me feel old.
How old does that make you feel? It's 2 a.m. in London and 9 p.m. in Washington. For viewers around the world and on PBS here in the United States, you're watching American Elections 2022 from the BBC.
Here is what we know at this hour. Polls are closing in Arizona, Colorado, Michigan, Wisconsin, and 11 other states. Important states that we'll be watching through the course of the night, particularly the one, of course, in Arizona, a very important governor's race, a very important senator's race. And also in Wisconsin, a senator's race and a governor's race there as well, very important. Our two experts, Ron Christie and Amanda Renteria, are back with us. What are you seeing, Amanda, in these early results on the East Coast tonight?
It's difficult. Whether the country changes and really starts to look to come together again, that's when people will look to folks like Liz Cheney, who really did find those bipartisan places, follow truth and move forward.
Martin Kimmitt joining us from Wyoming. Martin, thank you very much for joining us again. Thank you very much for the riding. It was one of the most fun political interviews I've ever done. And we rounded up the cattle. Thank you.
Martin Kimmitt in Wyoming. I learned so much about you tonight. You follow Sporting Georgia, you ride horses. You're quite the lady.
Don't judge a book and all of that. We'll be right back. It's 3 a.m. in London and 10 p.m. here in Washington. You're watching special BBC coverage of the US midterm elections. Polls have now closed in 3 more states, and the one that we're going to be watching in this hour in particular is the Senate race in Nevada. We're going to go there live as soon as we get there. That's going to be an interesting race to see whether a Trump-endorsed Republican candidate, Adam Laxalt, manages to unseat a Democrat. If the Democrats lose that race, that is a loss for them, and they'll have to find that race to pick it up somewhere else, because as we've been telling you over the course of the evening, the Senate is split 50-50. The whole thing is on a knife edge. In fact, we've just been talking about how we may not have all of the results in tonight.
Yes, we'll also be looking at Utah. I'm quite interested in the Senate race in Utah. Mike Lee, we will see. We will see. Of course, an election denier played quite a prominent role around the time of January 6th. How will the voters of Utah feel about that? What do we have so far? Well, so far, the Republicans look as if they're about to take control of the House of Representatives, although maybe our panel who are with us tonight might dispute that. We've had the Republican Ron DeSantis, who is projected to retain his governor's seat in Florida. Marco Rubio will also hold his Senate seat. The crucial Senate race in Georgia between Democrat Raphael Warnock and the Republican Herschel Walker is currently rated as a toss-up. That's according to our partner CBS News.
As opposed to some of the more traditional campaigns that are coming from the parties or paid adverts. And that's what we're seeing play out again tonight.
Okay.
Mariana, thank you very much indeed. Just hearing in my ear that our partner CBS are calling New Hampshire, the Senate seat in New Hampshire, for Maggie Hassan. I think, is that a call or is that a projection? I'm just hearing Maggie Hassan, just while we find out about that. It is a projection, I'm being told. But she was in real trouble. The Democrats have moved heaven and earth up there in the last 24, 48 hours to make sure that she crossed the line. And she was up against another Trump endorsement, Don Bolduc, General Bolduc. And in the polls, it was neck and neck. So if that is leaning towards them, more signs that this is only a ripple for Republicans.
The Democrats will be relieved. That is not one they would have liked to have lost. A lot of votes still out there to be counted, results to come in yet. It's 11 p.m. here on the US East Coast in Washington, 8 p.m. in California, where the polls are closing. For viewers, the polls, by the way, 6 hours is the time difference between the first polls closing and the last polls closing in America. It's such a big country. For viewers around the world and on PBS here in the United States, you're watching American Elections 2022 from the BBC.
In the last hour, we've been hearing from Donald Trump, albeit briefly. He made no mention of Governor Ron DeSantis. That might not surprise you, but the governor won re-election in Florida and could be Mr. Trump's rival for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination. In fact, the crowd who congratulated Ron DeSantis, who were there tonight at his headquarters, shouted 2 more years, which suggests that they would like him to run against Donald Trump in Florida. And as Katty's been saying, it really is ground zero already in Florida for who will become the nominee, the Republican nominee for the 2024 presidential election. Now, speaking of governors, Greg Abbott has won his bid in Texas, defeating Beto O'Rourke. Amanda and Ron are back with us. Beto O'Rourke losing again.
And we have seen that over the last few days. Of course, you can catch Americast on BBC Sounds and on our website as well. We will be back with more on the election after this short break. It is 5 a.m. in London, midnight here on the US East Coast. One day has ended, another begins, and the midterm results, no laughing, and the midterm results roll on here on our special BBC coverage. Our partner CBS says the current results show the House of Representatives is leaning towards the Republicans. It is only leaning, we're not there yet. We don't have a firm result on that.
But things are picking up steam across the country, with each party picking up key wins in a batch of Senate and governor's races.
The fate of the House, unknown, as we said, leaning towards the Republicans, as well as the final polls are closing in Hawaii. You forget what a huge country this is, that we had polls closing about 5 hours ago here and they're still only...
I volunteered for that count.
The Hawaii count.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was the Florida one you wanted. There's a pattern emerging here.
Here's Donald Trump, who was voting earlier in the day. He has spoken tonight at Mar-a-Lago. They've been holding a party, watching some of the votes come in. Actually, he didn't speak for very long. And interestingly, or maybe not too surprisingly, he didn't mention Ron DeSantis by name at all. We've got plenty more to come. More results coming in. We will, of course, keep you up to date with everything that is happening across the country. They're starting to count the votes on the West Coast now, so we should see some interesting things over there. But before we do that, let's pause for a little and get some news from Sally Bundock.
Thank you, Christian, and thanks to Katty as well. So as you were hearing there, the results of the US midterm elections are coming in. And in a major blow to President Biden, the Republicans look on track to take control of the House of Representatives. In Florida, the Republican state governor Ron DeSantis has increased his margin of victory substantially from 2018. Here's our Washington correspondent, Nomia Iqbal. Now, if you want to track the US elections 2022, you can do via our website, of course, BBC News. You'll find a dedicated live page there where you can see the latest results. There's also full background and analysis, bbc.com/news. Follow the links there. But also, of course, we're right across every twist and turn here on your television screen. So now it's back to the US elections 2022.
Welcome to our viewers around the world and in the UK who are watching our rolling coverage of the midterm elections. I've just come out of the studio for a short while to give you a feel for what's going on in the Washington newsroom. Busy night in a newsroom like this. You can see all these people here who will be here right until tomorrow morning, checking all the results. And it is a night like this where you really do appreciate your team because there's so much information coming into the newsroom. There are over 6,300 legislative races. There's 470 congressional races. There are 36 governor's races. And it's these guys who are putting it all on the chessboard, trying to make sense of it for you. But how do we check and double check these results? How and when will we know when to call them? Let's speak to Anthony Zerka, who's been here going through the results, still here. Some of it's a bit slow tonight. Why is that? There are pockets of Texas that are Democrat.
There are also you're right. That's the best bit of democracy. You get a young woman coming to America to do politics at a time when a lot of people are jaded, a lot of people are feeling that the country is so polarized that they can't get anything done. And you have somebody saying, look, I just want to come there and do the job for the members of my district. So that's the exciting bit of elections, right? You get new faces coming in.
Indeed so. We are counting the vote east to west. Plenty more to come tonight. In midterms 22, we have no real verdict on which way this election is going. But do stay with us for what is to come, because I think we can guarantee you a rather interesting night. We will say goodbye to our viewers on BBC One.
It is 6 a.m. in London, 1 a.m. here in Washington. You're watching the American elections 2022 on the BBC.
One of the races that we've been waiting is finally becoming a little clearer. Let me show you what our partner CBS News is reporting as we come to air, and that is that John Fetterman is likely the winner in Pennsylvania's Senate race, flipping that Senate seat from red to blue. This was the seat of the retiring Pat Toomey. I've been telling you through the night that the pollsters were suggesting that if the Democrats could hold this seat, their chances of retaining control of the Senate would be at 70%. Still a lot of votes to count, but our partner CBS saying that is now leaning a little more towards John Fetterman.
Yeah, this is not a final result just yet, But if confirmed, it would, of course, be very good news for the Democrats in a night that so far has produced more good news for the Democrats than we might have thought. And John Fetterman, by the way, himself has just tweeted, "It's official. I will be the next US Senator from Pennsylvania. We bet on the people of Pennsylvania and you didn't let us down, and I won't let you down. Thank you." Ron Christies, we're at 1 o'clock in the morning here in Washington. This Fetterman result, if it is confirmed, and at the moment we're only having it, CBS is projecting that that's what it's going to be. It's indicative in a sense, isn't it, of where the night is going so far for Republicans. You and I sat down at the beginning of this program and we ran through all of the reasons why this was going to be, should be, a very good night for Republicans. Inflation is at 8%. Amanda, Sarah, I'm not going to get your final thoughts because I want to tell them all to go and watch Americast where they will get all of your final thoughts. So save it there. Keep it in the green room. You can find it on bbc.com/sounds or on the BBC Sounds app to get more of Americast with Sarah Smith.
Stay with us because we are hanging around. We'll be right back.
It is 7 a.m. in London, 2 a.m. in the state of Pennsylvania, where voters have elected John Fetterman, the Democrat, as their next senator. This puts the Democrats in a strong position to hold on to the Senate. Let's take a look at some of the results so far. The fate of the House remains unknown at this hour. But we've got North Carolina Senate. That was a Republican hold. They kept that one. We've got Ohio. The Republicans also held on to Ohio. J.D. Vance, the Trump-endorsed candidate, took that one, defeating Tim Ryan. In Florida, Marco Rubio has held on to his Senate seat, defeating the Democrat challenger Val Demings. And in New Hampshire, the Democrats have held on to their seat. This one was a little tighter than they would have liked earlier in the race, but they held it quite comfortably. Maggie Hassan holding on 54% for the Democrats. And then the final one, which is the big one for the Democrats, because this is one that they've flipped. The Democrats have taken the Senate seat in Pennsylvania. That is John Fetterman, the most unusual Democratic candidate, much beloved in his state, and he has won it with 50%, beating Donald Trump's candidate, the celebrity doctor Mehmet Oz. Big win for Democrats.
Very big win for Democrats. We have Brian Lanza and Marianne Marsh here in the studio who are going to take us through to the half hour. Brian Lanza, I know you've been in contact with people at Mar-a-Lago tonight in the Trump team. What do they make of it?
Their candidates ultimately matter. You know, we had some bad candidates that, had these artificial sugar high because of inflation. It wasn't enough. We had artificial candidates, with the Trump endorsement. But at the end of the day, they underperformed because some of them weren't good candidates. And even the bad candidates from 2020, Laura in Colorado, she's losing now. So bad candidates are being exposed as bad candidates even from previous cycles.
Brian Lanza, Marianne Marsh, who've been with us all evening long. Thank you so much for joining us, for giving us your perspective and your insights, bringing us your tidbits during the course of the night as well. And of course, Anthony Zerker, thank you for coming into and bringing us the news that has been happening. It's been a very long night and we haven't had all of the results, but actually it's been a super interesting night because it ended up not as we had
I've learned
expected.
so much about you as well. Your sporting prowess,
my
your
riding.
horse riding.
Yeah.
It's been illuminating.
Who knew about the Georgia football and how important that would be in the course of this race? Well, Pennsylvania turned into the big story of the evening with that victory by John Fetterman. The Georgia Senate race, that's still too close to call. But Democrats should be breathing a little bit easier than they did at the beginning of tonight as they go to bed, if they're still awake, that is.
Tomorrow, though, there will be lots of discussion about what went right and what went wrong for each party. And then all eyes turn to 2024. It's already started. And the next election on our never-ending, always engaging, sometimes infuriating American political calendar.
Yeah, 2022 ushers in 2024. We'll be covering that too, I suspect, as well. And some of the same characters may be there from tonight that you see in 2024 as well. Our coverage of the elections on BBC World News continues from London in just a moment. And you can follow events, of course, on the live page, on the BBC News app as well. They'll be bringing you all the results as they come in, those ones that we didn't manage to get ourselves. I'm Katty Kay in Washington.
And I'm
Thanks so much
Fraser.
for having joined us.
Thanks for watching.
Hello and a very warm welcome to our continuing coverage of the US midterm elections. I'm Sally Bundock. Republicans are likely to take control of the House of Representatives, but only by a narrow margin, according to race projections. The race is too close to call in the Senate, but the Republicans have lost a key seat in Pennsylvania to the Democrats. Georgia may be heading for a runoff vote in 4 weeks' time. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis increases his share of the vote, boosting his credentials as a Republican presidential rival to Donald Trump.
Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world.
Votes are being counted in the crucial midterm elections in the United States. The Democrats, who have held both houses of Congress for the past 2 years, are predicted to lose the House of Representatives to the Republicans in these elections. In Pennsylvania, after an acrimonious race, the Democratic candidate John Fetterman has beaten the Republican Mehmet Oz, a former celebrity doctor, to become senator. There were many other dramatic wins and firsts. Here's our Washington correspondent, Nomia Iqbal.